Every fiat currency that's ever been created, and those are all created by man, that's the definition of fiat currency, ultimately has failed since the beginning of time. And that will ultimately happen to the current paper currency that we have in the world, whether it's the euro, the yen, the US dollar. These will all fail.
Good morning, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, and we're broadcasting from beautiful Phoenix, Arizona, where it's either heaven or hell, and in the summertime it's hell, and right now it's heaven. So a very important show, as that saying goes, may you live in insane times. We cannot get much more insane than this. That's one of the most, in my opinion, one of the most precarious times in history. It may be the end of the American empire, also a world war starting, and idiots running the government. What else can we ask for? I don't know. So I've been a gold bug and a silver bug. I started being a silver bug in 1964 and a gold bug in 1972. So today we have an authority on gold. And please pay very close attention because gold and silver are real money. And I also own Bitcoin because Bitcoin is people's money. Gold and silver are God's money. God put it here. And I'm not selling religion. And Bitcoin is just the people's response to the insanity running our financial systems. So our guest today is a longtime friend, David Garofalo. Let me read his credentials to you so you just know he knows what he's talking about. David Garofalo serves as chairman and CEO of Gold Royalty Corp. That's an interesting, the word royalty intrigues me. Chairman and CEO of the Marshall Precious Metals Fund intrigues me. And chair of the board of the Great Panther Mining Limited. Mining interests me. David is also president and CEO and director of Gold Corp, another important word. President and director of Hudbay from 2010. Senior vice president, CFO, and director of Angio Eagle from 1998. And treasurer of Inmet Mining from 1990. He also does other things. He also served on multiple public company boards over his career. And the reason David's so important here is that many people buy, I've been, for years, I used to advertise for Lear Capital and all these guys say buy silver and buy gold. And most people don't listen, but I've also been in David's neck of the woods, which is Vancouver, British Columbia, since the 1990s, and I started two gold mines, one in China, which the Chinese took, thank God, those bastards, and then one more in the United States, and a silver mine in Argentina. So this is why David's so important. The average person is going to buy coins or bars of gold and silver, but mining stocks is where the home runs are made. And David and I know all the years I was up in Vancouver, British Columbia, trying to sell my little dinky gold mines and silver mines. Mining is one of the most riskiest, full of lies business ever. But if you hit the right mine, you go to heaven right away. So David, thank you. Welcome once again to the Rich Dad Radio Show. And explain to us how you got such a stellar track record in an insane business called mining.
Well, I'm very fortunate. First off, I started with a good financial education. I'm a CPA by training, but at a very
That's good.
yeah,
That's very good. Very
it
good.
helps. Certainly, in a capital-intensive business where rates of return are hard to come by, understanding capital discipline, allocating capital is extremely important. But I ended up in roles with well-established mining companies, both in base and precious metals. I've spent equal amounts of my 35-year career in base and precious, and been involved in the development of 15 mines in my career, and worked with some very, very capable mine building teams and really built these businesses from the ground up. I'm a big believer in exploration, putting money in the ground to find new deposits, and developing them and de-risking them over time, putting capital to work in a disciplined fashion. And that's a lost art. Both the discovery and the mine building side of it is a lost art in our business. over the last dozen years, it's been a nuclear winter for juniors in our sector. They haven't had access to capital. So as a result, exploration has been in short shrift. In fact, gold reserves in the ground among the established producers in the world are down 40% from their peak in 2012 because there's been
But you're using vocabulary that a lot of people don't know about. And by the way, sitting on the wall behind me is the casual board game. The outer ring is the fast track. And one of my teachers was Frank Crary. They called him the Silver Fox of Wall Street. He took several mines public. So I learned the hard way. But what David's talking about here is about the mining industry. You have juniors and you have the majors. And right now, a lot of times the majors find their goal by having juniors dig first. And so it's almost like a kamikaze pilot. If you say, I'm going to start a junior mining company, people drink their sake and say bonsai, and you're off into the wild blue yonder, because the success rates against juniors is horrifying. Could you explain what happens to these juniors out there?
yeah,
You
it's
know,
super
they're
low
basically
success.
startup entrepreneurs. What's that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's super low success ratio. You're absolutely right. It's very, very difficult for a junior to be successful. One, because discovery is a bit of a lottery. There is some science to it. Obviously, geological science. You do geophysics. You survey the land. You walk it. You look for indications of mineralization near surface, and that hopefully indicates an area where you can drill and find new deposits. But I would say that you're lucky if 1 out of 20 work.
Yeah.
That's a pretty high success ratio, relatively speaking, 1 out of 20. So it's not hard to figure out why the seniors, the big players, don't do grassroots exploration. They effectively outsource that to the smaller players who are willing to take that kind of risk, swing for the fences. It's a risk embracing type of exercise to do junior exploration. You're always swinging for the fences. The established producers, the big guys, Barrick, Newmont, they don't do that kind of grassroots exploration because when you're running a big operating company like that, you're focused on just hitting your targets, your production targets, your cost targets. And that's about engineering the risk out of your business. Whereas juniors embrace that risk. It's an entrepreneurial business. And so that's why they have such a low success ratio. They generally don't have consistent access to capital, and it is a lottery. The discovery of deposits is a very, very hard game. But I'll tell you, running a big operating company is a very difficult proposition as well now, because not only are you facing declining reserves because of the lack of success of juniors, they haven't had access to money for a dozen years. The equity
Right.
capital markets just haven't embraced the juniors, but also they're faced with cost pressures. So the big guys are faced with significant inflation. They're not immune from inflation. We're all experiencing the general economy. And believe me, it's not 3 or 4 or 5%. We all know the headline inflation numbers are absolute science fiction. Inflation that we're all experiencing is closer to 15 to 20%. If you're putting fuel in your car, a roof over your head, or food in your stomach, you're experiencing 15 to 20% inflation right now. The
Yeah.
headline
So
numbers are
David,
there to kind of lull you into a false sense of complacency.
yeah. So I can give a plug right now for the VRIC, the Vancouver Resource Investor Conference. All of you guys listen to the Rich Dad Show. If you think you have an ounce of entrepreneurial blood, go to the VRIC, Vancouver Resource Investor Conference. I'm going to be there, but I was there, David, I was there for years as this little junior miner. I didn't have enough money to check out of the hotel. And, I'm pitching multi-million-dollar deals, hoping somebody will come and save us. And we did find gold and silver. We did have gold and we did have silver. This is what most people don't realize. That's when your problems begin. Because after we found the vein and all this, and our assays come in strong, then you have the government to fight with, all the environmentalists and all this stuff and the laws, and it is the most horrifying show. So all you guys out there who think you have a drop of entrepreneurial blood, starting your fast food restaurant, oh boy, come to the Vancouver Resource Investor Conference and go talk to these guys out there who are pitching deals. I go to it just to, I'm like the father confessor and pray for them, because Very few of those guys make it.
Well,
That's what you say.
that's why the industry's shrinking, Robert, so dramatically,
Yes.
and that's why you're seeing all the big guys start to merge with each other. Because if they're not finding into the ground, they have to buy it. They have to buy each other out,
Yes.
and that's just cannibalization. If you think about it, it's a
Yes.
zero sum game. It doesn't create value. It just creates
Yes.
scale for the sake of scale. And that's why after 30 plus years of building and operating mines, I'm running a royalty company because I do believe in the investment case for gold. I think the scarcity that we're talking about, the lack of success on the exploration side, the difficulty in bringing new production on means that there's going to be a huge supply squeeze on gold. And gold is going to fly. But in order to optimize your participation in gold, you want to be in something that offers you top line exposure. In other words, you get a percentage of the revenue, but protect yourself from the inflation at the mine site. Because as I said,
Right.
the seniors, the big producers are facing significant cost pressures. So you want to be exposed to the gold price. You want to be exposed to exploration upside, but you want to be protected from cost inflation at the mine site. And that's what a royalty company offers. And that's why after 30 plus years of building operating mines, I'm running a royalty company instead.
That's good news. That's good news. One more thing I want to say is for those of you who think you're Tarzan and you're a good entrepreneur and this is the best time to be into business because right now what David's going to be talking about is because of inflation, because of incompetence in America, really, the central banks, our treasury, and our president, and inflation going through the roof, demand for gold and silver has never been higher just at the time when the junior miners are disappearing. So the majors like Barrick and Newmont, the big boys, are desperately looking for gold and silver. And if they don't find it, what is going to happen anyway? Jim Rickards is calling for $15,000 gold and $1,000 silver. And today's gold is about 2,000 US, and silver is about 30 US. There is no more powerful time to be in gold and silver. Would you agree with me, David?
100%. I mean, look at gold's performance over the last 50 years since the US dollar was decoupled from the gold standard. The purchasing power of the US dollar has gone down more than 90%. So it's worth 10 cents to the dollar that you had back in the early 1970s. Whereas the gold price has gone from $35 to $2,000 over the same period. So where were you better placed with your savings, your capital, your hard earned savings over the last 50 years than gold?
Well, that means if you're saving dollars, you're losing money.
Absolutely. You're losing
You know,
purchasing power every day with the inflation that we've experienced. There's been a massive printing of currency since the US dollar was decoupled from the gold standard in the 1970s. That's why you've seen this massive inflation and this decline in the purchasing power of your dollar.
okay. So when we come back, we're going to be talking to David about a thing called royalties, which I don't know anything about. E.B. Tucker talks about it all the time. I've never invested because I'm a high risk guy. I always wanted to go for the home run, but as an older man now, royalties sound very, very good. And with a guy like David's experiences and seeing the ups and the downs and some of the horror shows, I think gold royalty makes a lot more sense today. And I would rather trust a guy like David than a guy like me standing next to a hole in the ground, someplace in Argentina or someplace in China trying to say, hey, invest in me, I'll find gold or silver. And there is no more critical time for gold and silver. So, Dave, when we come back, I'm going to ask you to talk about royalties versus mining. But as we go to close, could you tell me what your experience of was my favorite gold mine of all, Bre-X?
I had no exposure, but it just
Wait, wait.
speaks to the challenge of yeah, junior companies. So,
Well, Bre-X was a Sam Bankman-Fried of mining. Sam Bankman-Fried was the Bre-X of crypto. Bre-X was the biggest con ever pulled. So let's go to break. We have about 1 minute. What was Bre-X?
Bre-X was a junior explorer based in Canada, but exploring in Indonesia, and it was a fraud. They put out there that they made the biggest gold discovery in history, but there was no gold there ultimately, and it was a fraud perpetrated by the senior management of that team. of that company. And it was billions of dollars of capital that evaporated overnight as a result of that. Since then, there's been a complete overhauling of regulations in terms of what you can report as reserves and resources. People have to actually put their personal reputations and capital on the line in order to report reserves and resources. We call it a qualified person process. That means that there's somebody that's singularly responsible for reporting those reserves and resources and effectively putting their personal assets on the line now.
Yeah. Bre-X, again, was a Sam Bankman-Fried of gold for the junior miners. And we're all young guys we're going to make it, strike it rich. And these guys conned the smartest gold miners in the world. I don't know who they were, but they were smart dudes. So when we come back, we'll be talking to David about royalties, gold royalties, which I am now interested in because as an older gentleman, I've had enough of the ulcer-creating ups and downs of junior mining. We'll be right back.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kim Kiyosaki, co-host of the Rich Dad Radio Show. And I want to thank today's sponsor, our friends at Gold Alliance. You know, we should all be concerned about high inflation, a looming recession, the very troubled banking system, and out-of-control spending in Washington. And the fact is, during every major crisis in U.S. history, many of those who failed to prepare watched their savings, investments, and retirement funds plummet, while others with the foresight to own gold helped preserve their wealth and purchasing power. Now, we're facing several major crises at once, and we may soon face even more economic turmoil. So please don't wait. Consider gold and put yourself on the road to financial peace of mind. The new free 2023 Gold Guide from our friends at Gold Alliance can show you how. Just visit www.freegoldguide.com/Robert or call 1-800-473-4585. Republican Governor and conservative commentator Mike Huckabee says Gold Alliance is the only gold provider he recommends to his friends and family. Please visit freegoldguide.com/Robert or call now at 1-800-473-4585. Thank you.
Feeling powerless over current events and your financial future? Financial freedom is your freedom. Robert Kiyosaki is the best-selling author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Over 40 million people have taken Robert's advice. Now it's your turn. Attend Robert's free virtual wealth building event. Claim your free access now at richdadfree.com. Don't wait, access is limited. Go to richdadfree.com. That's richdadfree.com.
Welcome back, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show, the good news and bad news about money, and David Garofalo. And he is my go-to guy when the subject of mining. And today, you know, the central banks are buying gold hand over fist. It is the hottest thing. Silver is coming up the roof because of environmentalists. And the junior miners, which when you look at the cash flow board game back to the outer ring, are all junior miners. A lot of those things are Russian oil deals and deals I put together. And I want to plug the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference. If you guys think you're entrepreneurs, go to the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference. I think it's in January, and you'll meet real nutcases like you. I mean, these guys, I was that guy standing there with a hole in the ground, begging for money. We had gold and silver. Like I said, when you find it, your problems begin. And today, there's never been more demand for gold and silver, but they have no entrepreneurs today. And it's horrifying. That means the price of gold is probably going to go through the roof. But before we go on, I want David to talk about how stupid these environmentalists are, because, you know, copper is another product that comes from the ground. And these stupid SOBs are shutting down copper mines.
You know, it's a great point, Robert. We were talking about this off air. You know, I've spent as much of my career in copper mining as I have in gold mining, and I've built a few large-scale copper mines in my career. One of the copper mines that were built in the last 7 or 8 years by First Quantum Mining out of Canada was the Cobre Panama mine in Panama. And I was involved in the early stages of that when I was with Inmet Mining in the 1990s. And First Quantum did an exceptional job building that mine, $8 billion investment in Panama. It's been operating for about a half a dozen years, one of the biggest copper producers in the world. About half of the country's foreign currency proceeds come from that mine. So it's important to the Panamanian economy. And it's important to electrifying our economy and decarbonizing the world. EVs use 6 times the amount of metal that internal combustion engines do. We need a lot of copper to decarbonize the world. And now we have NGOs, environmentalists in Panama, trying to shut down this mine, which has been run in a very environmentally responsible way by one of the best operators in the world. And they're losing their minds here. It makes no sense. We need this copper to decarbonize our world. Why shut down a mine that's so vitally important to the Panamanian economy, vitally important to our decarbonization efforts globally? If we can't keep mines like this operating, we have no hope for reaching our carbon emission goals globally.
Yeah. When I was saying, David, I bought an EV the other day, not because I love EVs, but because I think this war in the Middle East is going to drive oil prices through the roof. So I'd rather just run off my house power, and my license plate says coal powered, because that's where energy comes from. These environmentalists are as stupid as the guys running our Federal Reserve Bank and our Treasury. They're all academics. They all got PhD after the name, which stands for poor, helpless, and desperate. We should not let PhDs into government. They're stupid people. So let's go into royalty. Again, Rich Dad makes no recommendations. We don't say buy this or buy that. I'm interested in royalties personally. I'll probably invest with David just because of his credentials. Because if you're good with your money, the problem is too much money. So I need to move a lot of money, David. So tell us about, and I'm not recommending it. Hear me, hear me, hear me. We don't make recommendations, but I am personally interested. So with a guy like David's credentials, I'm definitely more interested.
Sure.
So what is royalty? What's royalty versus mining?
Sure. First off, our company is Gold Royalty Corp, GROY on the NYSE American, singularly on the New York Stock Exchange. So we're not on smaller junior exchanges within Canada. And we have a portfolio of over 240 royalties across the Americas in the best jurisdictions in the world. You talked about Chinese expropriation of assets a little earlier, Robert. We're not in those types of jurisdictions. We're in Nevada, and we're in the two best provinces in Canada as well for mineral potential, low political risk, and low regulatory risk. So nobody's going to take our assets away from us. And because we're a royalty company, we can own almost an infinite number of royalties. We can diversify, which a mining company really can't do. Not only are they exposed to inflation in their cost structures, but there's a limit to how many mines you can run. When I ran Goldcorp, which was one of the biggest producers in the world at the time, I had 20,000 employees across a dozen assets. That was the limit to what we could run practically. So there's a limit to what you can achieve in diversification with an operating company. But the other thing is, by owning a royalty, you own a percentage of the top line of the revenue. We provide capital to the operators, developers, and explorers. In return, we take a royalty back. So we give them the money they need to explore, develop, and operate their mines and expand them. And rather than get a repayment in capital, it's not a loan, we're getting a royalty, a perpetual royalty on the mine. And not only...
Wait.
Yeah.
David said that he's a CPA. You're taking your cut off the top line,
Yep,
not the invisible bottom line.
Exactly. It's like the movie business. You want the top line exposure.
As a junior miner, one of those entrepreneurs standing at VRIC in Canada, if there was a bottom line, there was nothing there.
Exactly.
So a lot of investors were terrified. I'm asking for only $25,000 at a shot, but they didn't know if there was a bottom line except zero.
Yeah.
Or negative.
You want a percentage of the gross.
What David is talking about is you're taking it from the profits. You're first in line. Am I correct there?
Yeah. So percentage of the gross as opposed to a percentage of the net. That way, we're not worried about the operating costs of the mine site inflating. So basically, there are ounces produced times the gold price, and we get a percentage of that, typically 1%, 2%, 3%. So we get paid before anybody else does. And We're protected from cost inflation. That's the beauty of the royalty model, is you get complete exposure to the gold price without worrying about what happens to the margins at the mine. So if the margins get squeezed because of cost inflation, which is rearing its ugly head right now, we don't worry about that. That's really the responsibility of the guys that own the mine. We don't own the mine. We own a piece of the gross, basically. That's how the model works. And that's why it's such an attractive model. But not only that, Robert, we're exposed to the exploration upside. So we have a royalty not only in the existing reserves in the ground, but if they, through their exploration efforts, the operators discover more, our royalty extends to their exploration success. But the beauty of that is we don't pay for the exploration. Once we own a
Right.
royalty, we own it forever in perpetuity. And that means that any exploration they conduct is on their dime, but we get the benefit of that upside.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Once again, it's called Gold Royalty Corp. How do they get? How do people? Again, we're not recommending it. I'm telling you, I'm going to invest in it right now because anyway. But how do they invest in it, David?
Well, it's a publicly listed stock on the NYSE American under the trading symbol GROY, GROY. Very easy to buy. We're quite liquid. We trade about 1 million shares a day. So there's quite a bit of liquidity. So if you're looking to build a position, not very difficult to do given the relative liquidity of the stock. We don't have any majority shareholders, so there's quite a large float out there. So the stock is available to buy on the NYSE American.
Well, the greatest thing about business, as you know, is who's on your team, and that's why I'm sold. I'm in. I'm not recommending it. We don't recommend what you buy at Rich Dad Radio, but I tell you, I'm so excited because knowing what I know about junior miners collapsing and demand increasing, and idiots at the White House and the Fed and the Treasury. I mean, they're printing so much money. I, you know, it makes Canadians blush. Even I mean, they Canadians are very conservative people generally, and the
Yeah,
Americans now are stupid. There's a difference between conservative versus stupid. And this guy Biden is stupid. Oh my God. Where did they find him? Of course, he works for Obama, and Obama works for Soros, as we all know. So that's why we're kind of really messed up. And these people hate America. So I would like to encourage people, I don't recommend, look into gold and silver to protect you from the insane individuals running the US government today. Because the dollar is still very powerful throughout the world and is in trouble. So what are the central banks doing with gold right now, David? They're buying, aren't they?
they're big consumers of gold right now because they recognize that their fiat currencies are being undermined by the very central banks that they're running. And the reason they're doing that is because there's a massive amount of debt that's been strapped on over the course of the last 15 to 20 years because of easy money policies. US debt today has grown to over $50 trillion. Debt service, US government debt service is now over $1 trillion per year, one out of every $7 of tax revenue. And that's
Wait,
doubled.
wait, wait, wait. That means they cannot pay for our debt with our taxes.
No way. There's no fiscally responsible way for them to repay the debt. So the only thing they can do is inflate it away. Just keep printing US dollars and debase the value of that debt. And that's just a fundamental economics. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's just the reality, the economic reality they face. They put on so much debt on their balance sheets. There's no way for them to repay it. They have to make the debt shrink as a percentage of the overall economy. And the way to do that is inflate it away, inflate the economy, flood it with dollars. And so this tightening that they've shown in interest rates over the last 18 months isn't doing anything because inflation rates are well above where the interest rates are. So that means real interest rates are actually negative. That's why central banks are buying gold. Gold yields nothing as a financial instrument, 0% yield. But treasuries are yielding negative on a real basis. When you take inflation away from the interest rates that are getting paid on treasuries, you're actually losing purchasing power every day. The value of your dollar is going down. As I said earlier on, the US dollar has lost over 90% of its purchasing power since it abandoned the gold standard in the early 1970s. The gold price has gone in the opposite direction. It's gone from $35 to $2,000 an ounce. That's the most accurate barometer of what's happening to your fiat currency. The gold.
Those are the facts.
Yeah,
those are the facts.
That's it. Gold is finite in quantity. It can't be printed. It's nobody's obligation. No central bank in the world owns it. Has ownership of gold. They own it in their central bank reserves, but they can't control it. It's the one currency you can't control.
Right. What some people may not realize was in 71, Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. He made treasuries gold, basically. And what central banks have been buying are treasury bonds and treasury bills and all that printed stuff. And that's why in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, 25 years ago, I said savers are losers. They lose money simply because our government prints money.
Yes.
But our school systems don't teach you that. So I'm not saying that Biden and Obama and those who came before them are crooks. I think they're just stupid. I mean, I mean, how in the world can you just keep printing money and tell me you went to school?
Yeah,
And they're PhDs.
the temptation since the beginning of time, the temptation
Yeah.
by man-made governments is to debase their fiat currency. Paper is infinite, gold is finite. That's why gold has been the ultimate currency for 4,000 years, whereas paper currencies have come and gone. Every fiat currency ever created has ultimately failed. And that will happen
Yep.
with the US dollar and every other currency in the world today.
Say that again. Every what?
Every fiat currency that's ever been created, and those are all created by man, that's the definition of fiat currency, ultimately has failed since the beginning of time. And that will ultimately happen to the current paper currency that we have in the world, whether it's the euro, the yen, the US dollar, these will all fail. And time and again, as we saw in Germany 100 years ago, these paper currencies fail. As we've seen in Zimbabwe of late, as we've seen in Venezuela, it's just one after another. It's like a domino effect.
It's interesting that this is a 100-year anniversary of the Weimar Republic. 2023 is 1923. And there was a Treaty of Versailles, and they printed all this trash. And a guy named Adolf Hitler came to power, and Mussolini, and millions died. David, as a CPA, do you look that into the crystal ball? I went to military school, so I wonder how many people are going to die because of this. We're 100-year anniversary of 1923. What do you see coming as far as, is it potential of social unrest?
Yeah, history repeats itself. When you see fiat currencies collapse, it does create social unrest. It creates hyperinflation. People lose their purchasing power. And I'm concerned like you. Like, you served in the military back in the 1970s as a Marine pilot. I have a son that serves in the Canadian military as an Air Force pilot as well. He's in the Middle East right now. These are fraught times. And I think it's been precipitated by the debasement of fiat currencies, by wrong economic decisions that really have undermined the foundation of our economy. And that's why it's important to have gold in your portfolio, and royalty companies provide you that exposure.
Right. So you're saying there is a direct correlation between war and fiat currency.
Yeah, when you see a debasement of the foundation of the economy and the fiat currencies, it generally leads to the hyperinflation that we saw 100 years ago. But we've seen time and again in various economies in modern times as well, as we've seen in Argentina and Venezuela and Zimbabwe. Just go across the world where there's been a debasement of fiat currency, there's been social unrest, and ultimately war.
So one more time, tell us what's going on with central banks. Have they finally found religion and getting out of paper and going to gold?
Yeah, central banks are sucking and blowing. They're debasing their fiat currencies, but at the same time, as quickly as possible, they're buying hard assets to diversify their central bank reserves, because they not only don't trust their own fiat currencies, they don't trust anybody else's fiat currencies they have in their central bank reserves. That's why China is not only the biggest producer of gold in the world as a country, but also the biggest importer of gold. So they consume everything they produce, and then they import more gold than any other country in the world. They're smart. They get it. They understand that the US dollar is being debased, and they're the biggest holder of US dollar treasuries. But they're diversifying as quickly as possible out of those treasuries into gold in their central bank reserves.
So David, thank you. Thank you very much. Again, David is the CEO and chairman of Gold Royalty Corporation. There's a difference between a royalty corporation. They take the money from the top line. And I was on the bottom line there, hoping there was some bottom line left. But as I said earlier, I found out the hard way as an entrepreneur, a young entrepreneur. Your problems begin when you find gold, because then everybody's upon you and it's hard to make a buck. But anyway, thank you, David. Thanks for all the experience, and thanks for sharing it on the Rich Dad Radio Show.
Thanks, Robert, for having me on.
And we come back, we'll have a final word. Thank you very much. Hello, and welcome back. I want to thank David, and he's a chairman and CEO of Gold Royalty Corp. Please take a look at that. We don't make recommendations, but I will tell you when I invest in something and I don't invest in something, I'm definitely going to invest in him, because as the cash flow board game shows, that's what the entrepreneurs are on the fast track. And that's the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference, which I go to simply because that's where the deals are found, the early stages. But only if you're an entrepreneur. If you're looking for job security, don't go to VRIC. They'll scare the crap out of you. But once again, Rich Dad Radio, you can go to richdadradio.com, find this program, listen to it again and again. and have that silly brother-in-law who is saving cash listen to this show, and maybe they might change their mind. But Rich Dad is purely an educational company. We make no recommendations. I want to thank David for being part of our program. And please consider gold and silver instead of cash, which is trash. Thank you very much.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.